No, like literally, I just did that. I just did a video. You're asking me to do another one? Hi. Hi there. I'm back with another Deep Cuts video. This is the second episode in a video series where I pick my favorite deep cuts from high-profile albums. In episode 1, I took a look at some of the goated or best of all time albums across different genres and eras. Today, I'll keep the musical styles diverse, but I'll be focusing on the 1980s. Most of you know what a deep cut is, but if you don't, it's a song from an album that usually gets overshadowed or underappreciated, and sometimes it's buried deep in an album's track list and pretty much just gets overlooked for the album's lead single. Deep cuts are not commonly one of the most celebrated songs in an artist's catalog, and they're rarely played live. Sometimes they are, but most times they're not. Either way, it often flies under the radar for one reason or another, but they can happen chronologically at any point on an album. It can literally be the album's second track, or it can be the second to last. Okay, so what I did is I took 10 marquee albums from the 1980s, and I picked one deep cut off of each of them that I think is my favorite. Not gonna go through every big album from the 80s here, but I think I got a pretty good sample size. Let's go. Prince had a fantastic run in the 80s that culminated with what I think is his finest album, 1987's Sign of the Times. This is a jam-packed double album full of 80 minutes worth of material that has some of the funkiest moments in an already funky discography. And for me, every time I listen to this album, its third track, Housequake, is the first thing that really gets me going as I spin the album. Housequake just always grabs me with that right amount of bounce and funk. It's just right. The balance is perfect. It's got some great syncopated rhythms, and there's a bit of a call and response type thing that Prince does with his vocals. He almost like scats or raps through most of the duration of the track. The synths on here are very punchy and they match the rhythm section nicely. And this, for me, is actually on a short list for the grooviest track off of this masterpiece of an album. Prince really knew how to make decadently funky tracks, and by 1987, by Sign of the Times, he was just a master of his craft. He really just had a ton of diversity as a musician and songwriter, but as I look back across his catalog, my favorite moments of his are the most deeply, decadently funky moments like Housequake. Even though it's the third track of the album, it's a true deep cut off of the seminal Sign of the Times. Metallica's Ride the Lightning is probably my favorite album of theirs. It shows them young, hungry, and raw, and it's a clinic in well-executed thrash metal that should receive the same, if not more, acclaim than albums like Master of Puppets or And Justice for All. I do think that almost every single track on this album is perfect or nearly perfect, but I do think the sixth track, or the second track on the B-side, Escape, is one that gets the most overshadowed on the record. I will say that Escape is probably the least remarkable song off of Ride the Lightning, but only because it's a mid-tempo thrasher when most of the rest of the album is either face-melting thrash or these emotional, dramatic ballads. Escape acts as a mid to late album break from just the wall of face-melting thrash, and I know they slowed it down a little bit on For Whom the Bell Tolls and Fade to Black. Those were more calculated, but the most relentless song on the album is the track that precedes Escape, Trapped Under Ice. And Escape kind of slows things down, gives the listener a little bit of a break after Trapped Under Ice, and sets up what is a fantastic end of the album. As the story goes, Escape was actually supposed to be one of the lead singles off of this album, but it just kind of got thrown late into the album's track list and almost forgotten about. I think it's cool when a band can kind of slow it down and show a little bit of sonic diversity, but not sacrifice any heaviness. That's a big thing for me when it comes to metal, as a lot of metal tends to run together, and Metallica pull off this sonic diversity perfectly on Escape. Hip-hop's golden age exploded in the late 80s, and while there are many albums I could pick from, I want to focus on De La Soul's debut, 3 Feet High and Rising. The Long Island three-piece of DJ Maceo, Posdnuos, and Trugoy teamed up with Stetsasonic producer Prince Paul for their debut, and the result is just a remarkable album on all levels, lyrically, sonically, everything, conceptually. During a time where hardcore hip-hop, big chains, braggadocio, when that was the trend, when you had rappers like Big Daddy Kane steamrolling the competition, De La Soul were kind of these peaceful, sort of funny hippie types. They came out with a laid-back, idealistic, and humorous persona that gave a whole new perspective to golden age hip-hop. The album is actually pretty dense. There's a lot going on as it features 8 singles and just about the same amount of interludes and skits, which are fun, lighthearted, and show the group playing along in what's kind of a fictional game show. But one of the few songs that is actually a song and not a skit, and is also not a lead single, is the album's third track, Change and Speak. I think the song is actually one of the best examples off of this album that kind of represents the new style that De La Soul was utilizing, as through its abstract and creative lyricism from Posdnuos and Trugoy, it explains basically that De La Soul was there to change the way that hip-hop was being presented. The song is quick, it's unassuming, and it establishes early in the album that De La were not your run-of-the-mill trio who was trying perhaps to squeeze into an already saturated late 80s hip-hop scene. They let the listener know that they were conscious, intelligent, and representing kind of a new wave of artists as part of the Native Tongues crew, which included acts like A Tribe Called Quest and the Jungle Brothers. They were in their infancy at this time, and De La was instrumental in getting the collective established. They wore this new persona with pride, and Change and Speak, I think, is a pivotal moment in hip-hop's golden age. As De La Soul, they were announcing the arrival of a new era. This is a great, underrated deep cut, track 3 on 3 Feet High and Rising. Rush is a band that a lot of people love, but there's also many that can't stand them. I'm in the former. I love Rush. But whether or not you're a big fan of the band, it's hard not to see the greatness of their 1981 album Moving Pictures. It was their 8th album. They had established themselves big time by this time, and it's known for a lot of fire on the A side. Tom Sawyer, YYZ, Limelight, Red Barchetta, all some of Rush's best cuts and some of the best radio-friendly prog rock of the time. The album may be best known for these songs, but it's also really conceptually known for marrying this prog rock style with almost a radio-friendly sound. So naturally, the track that I'm going to pick off of this album is the one that's nothing like the rest of them, at least not on the A side. It's the first track from the B side, the 11-minute long The Camera Eye. Rush was known for a lot of these 10, 15, 20-minute songs that punctuated most of their albums to this point, but much to the chagrin of classic Rush fans, this is the last 10-minute song that the band would ever do, as they decided after Moving Pictures and after the success that it achieved to kind of abandon one of the formulas that made them so infectious and lovable to fans. And it's no secret that Rush kind of went downhill from here as they started kind of bringing in new wave styles. I don't mind it personally, but it was nothing like their 70s work. Regardless, Moving Pictures to me is a fantastic and perfect album actually, and The Camera Eye is this winding, long song with excellent guitar and drum work from Alex Lifeson and Neil Peart. Peart wrote the lyrics to this song as he did for many Rush songs on many albums, and he spins a tale of a day in the life in the two biggest and most important English-speaking cities on the globe, New York City and London. Geddy Lee's delivery is just excellent. I just love his punchy vocal style here. For me, on an album with so much heat leading up to this point, if a track like The Camera Eye can grab my attention after all of that, after the Tom Sawyers, the Red Barchettas, the YYZs, then it must be a damn good song. No way should The Camera Eye live in the shadows of any of these other songs. It's classic Rush. It's perfectly executed. It tells an awesome story. But due to how influential and popular the beginning of the album is, I kind of get why this is the case. For me, it's an unforgettable song, and it's actually one of the band's finest in what is a remarkable catalog. A band that evolved through the 80s and came into their own like none other that I can think of is Sonic Youth. I love these guys to death, all the way back to their self-titled album in 1982, Confusion is Sex in 1983, watching them grow from album to album as the decade progressed, which culminated in 1988's classic Daydream Nation, which is considered one of the best albums of all time, is just so satisfying. Daydream Nation marries these raw, cold, anxious, dissonant styles that the band made their name on earlier in the decade to a new, brighter, and more smoothly produced sound, and a lot of purists did not really like that. If they thought Daydream Nation was a step in the wrong direction, what did they think of Goo, which by the way is also an awesome album? So while the purists may think it's overrated, I love it. Many others love this album too. It's a long, winding effort with a bunch of different moods. It's a double album, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it is like 72 minutes, so it's not that bad. Buried pretty deep back in the album is the fourth track on the C-side, Rain King, which is my deep cut choice here. It's super underrated. It's one of my favorites from the record. It's written and sung by guitarist Lee Ronaldo, who usually has one or two cuts off of most of their albums. I actually think the Lee Ronaldo cuts on Sonic Youth albums are some of the better ones. Kind of just to have Lee Ronaldo as that secret weapon, that's something that really helped this band ascend even higher. It utilizes a dissonant, guitar-driven wall of sound that was pretty indicative of their earlier work, and it acts almost kind of like a throwback to that style. Ronaldo's lyrics are pretty abstract, and they may be referring to the 1959 Saul Bellow novel of the same name. Either way, it's a quirky cut, it's buried quite deeply on Daydream Nation, and due to its anxious, ominous, menacing soundscapes that date back to the band's early days, it's one of my favorites. If you like what you're seeing, do me a favor, please hit that subscribe button. I'm a small creator, I'm getting bigger and bigger by the day, and the thing that helps me the most is to build my community, to expand my reach. I'm glad you guys are here watching this video today. I'm always glad to have you on board, and I want to take a second to thank you for spending this little bit of your time with me today. today. On with it now. New York City's Talking Heads had one of the best runs in music history between their debut 1977's Talking Heads 77 and 1983's Speaking in Tongues. They slowly developed their styles from new wave and art punk earlier in their career to this funky post-punk style that was really emerging as the 80s began. Their 1980 album Remain in Light stands as one of the most genre-bending and unique sounding albums of all time, as it mixes those new wave and post-punk styles that Talking Heads were originally known for, with other styles like funk and Afrobeat. The Afrobeat style, which was apparently inspired by Nigerian music legend Fela Kuti, was a main focal point for frontman David Byrne, as he and producer Brian Eno, who was on his third album already with Talking Heads by Remain in Light, helped develop this sound. While Remain in Light is more known for cuts like Cross-Eyed and Painless, The Great Curve, and the seminal Once in a Lifetime, I find that the more ominous, plodding music and narrative of Listening Wind brings a calculated sonic diversity to this album. It's one of the most enjoyable moments on the record for me, and it's my choice deep cut on this 80s all-time great. It's the fourth track on the B-side, it's the second to last track overall on the album, and while the B-side kind of doesn't live up to the way that the A-side plays, I think Listening Wind is one of the best songs on the second half of the album. Along with about half of the other tracks on this album, features a guest appearance from King Crimson frontman Adrian Belew, who punctuates this polyrhythmic shuffle on Listening Wind with a flanger in his guitar parts, which makes for a really cool effect. Along with the rhythm section of drummer Chris Franz and bassist Tina Weymouth, this gives the song a very exotic feel, perhaps more than some of the marquee cuts on here, which had a very exotic feel. Lyrically, Byrne tells a very stark story of an African terrorist targeting colonizers, cementing the band's anti-imperialist views. Remain in Light is known for its energy, its quirkiness, and its utilization of non-traditional music styles. Listening Wind is the darkest cut on here, and while I do prefer the more upbeat moments, as I'm sure we all do, I really appreciate the darker change of pace, and Byrne's politically driven lyrics give this an awesome edge. We couldn't go through a list of 80s marquee albums without talking about The Cure. One of my favorite bands of the era, and a band that has most of their peak work in the 80s. The Cure definitely has great albums outside of the 80s, like 1992's Wish, and how about 2024's Songs of a Lost World? Like, what a comeback that was. Take your pick as to what their best 80s album is. Many people pick 1989's Disintegration. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. You could also go with 1981's Faith, which shows them a little bit more energetic, a little younger, a little less jaded. Even The Head on the Door from the mid-80s was this mainstream poppy sort of album that was way different than anything they had done, and it really worked. But The Cure was best known for being an incredibly dark and depressing band, and I feel like they captured this best on their fourth album, 1982's Pornography. I think this is the finest of their early albums, and I think it really embodies just how sad and tortured these guys may have been, especially frontman Robert Smith. On the seventh and second to last track of this album, Robert Smith actually picks up a cello and goes to work on the song Cold, and he provides one of the most morose soundscapes on a mainstream-facing record that I've ever heard. I mean, this song blows me away every time with how sad it is, and he's speaking to the depths and despair of drug addiction, which was a big problem for the band on this album, apparently. The pounding, muddy drums from Lowell Tolhurst give this such an awesome vintage feel, and the orchestral synths, courtesy of bassist Simon Gallup, what they do is they set a musical stage for Smith to drag the listener deep down into the depths of despair. And look, you know I appreciate darker and more morose cuts. I mean, I just named Listening Wind, the darkest track off of that Talking Heads album, as my choice deep cut there. But Cold, this is on another level. This is cold, for lack of a better term. The album is already sullen, it's already downtrodden, and Cold just takes things to another level, and it's one of the most depressing songs I've ever heard. Maybe that's why it's such a deep cut, and it's why it's my deep cut, but I think there's a lot of Cure fans that really, really love this one as well. So it may not be a deep cut to everybody, but for me, it does the job. So I decided to talk about a Cure album. Of course, I could have gone with 1989's Disintegration. I've talked about that album on my channel a number of times, but another album from 1989 that's a little more upbeat, a little more whimsical is Pixies' second album, Doolittle. This record, it's an indie rock classic. It's one of the most influential early indie rock albums of all time. It set the stage for the genre, and it showed a wonderfully dissonant, disturbing musical and vocal style that somehow remained bright and upbeat at times. It often randomly and suddenly switched from these weird, dark, manic passages that Black Francis was screaming to happy, bubbly, upbeat, surf rock influenced songs. I always thought it was such a cool transition how the Pixies were able to pull that hat off. The marquee songs like Here Comes Your Man are very upbeat and bright, as I said, but it's some of the deeper cuts that you get some of these stranger dynamics that come into play. This mixture of sonic styles is perhaps most prominent on the album's 6th track, Dead. Frontman Black Francis actually tells the biblical story of David and Bathsheba, which is one of seduction and violence. And while there are no religious ties to this album, Black Francis was apparently raised in a very religious household, but he was also fascinated by some of the Bible stories, and he kind of sarcastically alluded to them in the band's music, including here in the song Dead. The song is punctuated by Joey Santiago's excellent dissonant guitar work that resolves into a major, brighter chord progression for the song's chorus. Francis' vocal style definitely utilizes more of the scream delivery that he was known for on the less mainstream moments on this album. Doolittle is such an important indie rock classic. It combines so many awesome musical styles, and I find this is best done on songs like Dead. Don't let the biblical subject matter of this song turn you off if you're not religious like me. Black Francis is aggressive, sarcastic, and ultra creative in the way that he delivers this message in this story, and Dead is one of the prime deep cuts from Doolittle. Back to hip-hop for my second to last deep cut. It comes off of one of the most heralded hip-hop projects of the entire decade, coming out in 1989 and featuring an absolute clinic of sampling and production almost like no other album from the time. Paul's Boutique showed the Beastie Boys taking major astronomical steps forward on their second record. After the hard partying anthems and frat boy punk raps on their 1986 debut License to Ill, seeing the Beastie Boys come back just 3 years later with such an important and advanced record, it's just one of those moments in music that still is unbelievable as I think about it to this day. The Beastie Boys have a great catalog, but Paul's Boutique is far and away their finest album in my opinion. It features so many great sampling moments, and that's what this album is known for on songs like The Sounds of Silence, Car Thief, Eggman, Looking Down the Barrel of a Gun, and the amazing 9-part closer B-Boy Bouillabaisse. However, buried at the end of the A-side is a track called 3 Minute Rule, which I definitely think lives in obscurity when compared to the rest of this album. It features an excellent sample from Sly and the Family Stone's Brave and Strong, and like on most of the album, the Beastie Boys and the Dust Brothers share production duties here. And like the rest of the record, there are some strong psychedelic tendencies, but the track also features heavy reverb on the percussion, and then there's this bass line that reminds me of dub music. Lyrically, Mike D, MCA, and Ad Rock give these references to weed and debaucherous women. There's not a whole lot of substance on this thing lyrically, it's more the soundscapes. And honestly, the soundscapes were the big selling point of Paul's Boutique. These guys were a little more abstract in the raps than on License to Ill, but again, this is not the greatest lyrical performance of all time. I think the dub-influenced vibe of 3 Minute Rule is one of the best moments on the album. It should be right up there with the album's prime cuts, and it's my select deep cut off of one of the best produced hip-hop albums ever, the seminal Paul's Boutique. Alright, finally, I'm ending this up with my favorite deep cut off of one of the most influential new wave synth pop and post-punk albums in existence, and that's New Order's 1983 masterpiece, Power, Corruption, and Lies. Formed by members of what used to be Joy Division in the wake of their frontman Ian Curtis's death, New Order got going pretty quickly in the early 80s, dropping their first album in 1981. That album was a little bit more true to the post-punk and cold wave styles of Joy Division, but on Power, Corruption, and Lies, they decided to incorporate elements of electronic music and accessible synth pop into their new wave and post-punk soundscapes, and it worked flawlessly. While the album is known for new wave stalwarts like Age of Consent and awesome early electronic cuts like Your Silent Face and 586, I think the album's second to last track, Ecstasy, should be held in the same regard as some of these higher profile tracks. Ecstasy may suffer from being kind of towards the back end of the album, the 7th out of 8 tracks overall, the 3rd on the B-side, but it has such a danceable, funky, groovy, synthy vibe that I just love. It's simplistic, but it features some cool, distorted, robotic vocal lines, sounded very futuristic for 1983. When I listen to some of the most acclaimed work from a group like Daft Punk, I kind of hear influences from this track. Ecstasy, there's not too much to say about it. It's just this fun little 4.5 minute groove, but I don't hear a lot of people talk about this song, and I don't think that's right. This is a great cut. It's so infectious, it's so enjoyable, and because it doesn't really receive the love that I think it should, it's a deep cut. Power, Corruption, and Lies, one of the most high-profile 80s albums in existence, and Ecstasy is an underrated gem. That's it. That's my 80s deep cuts list. Comment below. What do you think? Do you agree? What do these albums mean to you? Are there other albums that you would pick deep cuts off of? What about Michael Jackson's Thriller? I struggle with that one. What are your favorite deep cuts off of Thriller? Either way, let me know below. Love the interaction. Love you guys for supporting me. Thank you again for spending your time with me today. And this is just the second episode of my deep cut series. I'll see you in the next one.